a shocking surge in bomb threats, all of them hoaxes, that's rattled Indian aviation. Multiple flights targeted in recent days, and obviously it creates huge losses for the airlines. The Civil Aviation Ministry swung into action. Central agencies are now cracking down, trying to identify where these calls are coming from. Most of them are being posted on social media. So the central agencies are now roping in VPN service providers to actually trace the origins of where these threats are being put out. Remember that there have been 22 of these in the last 4 days. Unfortunately, 22 and counting.
Over 20 bomb threat calls in 4 days. And 4 days on, no leads on who is behind these hoax calls. Central agencies are set to approach VPN service providers in an effort to trace the origin of these hoax calls. Sources in Aviation Ministry revealed that many of these threatening calls have utilized VPN, which is further making the tracking process complicated. The Civil Aviation Minister, however, ruled out any wide conspiracy asserting that hoax calls are made by minors and pranksters.
No, I think these are all just rumors that are floating around. That we can't comment on that. But whatever we know right now, there are all individual people, most of them minors, who don't understand the whole idea of what they are doing, and they are creating this kind of inconvenience. But from our side, we are going to see what best we can do.
Centre is considering a number of steps, including bringing new legislation for hoax callers and putting the hoax callers on a no-fly list. On October 17, 5 Air India flights and 1 Indigo flight received bomb threats, following 3 similar incidents on October 16, 7 on October 15 and 3 on October 14. Alarmingly, 3 international flights were among those targeted. Air India's Mumbai-London flight, Indigo's Istanbul-Mumbai flight and Vistara's Frankfurt-Mumbai flight. Amid this, the Aviation Ministry is also studying the best model available globally to tackle the recent hoax pattern. Bureau Report, India Today.
So let's tell you what the government has done so far in their attempt to actually tackle and ensure that there's a deterrent so people don't take to social media putting up a flight number and saying that there's a bomb threat. First is that a new legislation will be brought in to tackle hoax callers, essentially ensuring stringent punishment so people think twice before going ahead and resorting to this kind of a step. The second action is that hoax callers will be put on a no-fly list for a substantial amount of time. These hoaxers will also be penalized heavily. The plan is that the hoaxers will be made to pay the price of the loss that the airline has suffered. This will include passenger expenses too. Now, this is what the government plans to do to counter these airline bomb threats. Remember that many of these announcements were made yesterday. It hasn't so far proved to be a deterrent. And that brings us to the question of why they've been struggling to really control or curb this. First, who is of course behind these hoax bomb threats? We still don't have any details about whether it's all linked or not. Why is it so very hard to actually nab the accused in this particular case? If there are multiple of them, to identify them using their social media accounts, how hard can it be? Is there a larger conspiracy behind these threats? The fact that in 4 days you've seen 22 flights receiving these threats leads to serious questions really about what the plan is, why is it happening right now, and why has it been happening consecutively for the last 4 days? Are all of these hoaxes connected? The government says no, they're not connected, they're completely stray incidents. But is there some common group in which there's some coordination happening that's leading to all of them resorting to the same modus operandi? Can this really just be prank calls allegedly being made by some minors on social media? Considering, like I said, everything doesn't really match up here with the fact that this is all happening in the last 4 days in a very similar manner. As far as who's done this is concerned, the only information that we have is that an IP address has been traced, which is an X handle called Shitso Bomber 777. Now, obviously, this sounds like a made-up handle. Who exactly is handling this at this point? They're yet to figure it out. And the reason for that is because the IP address has been traced to London and to Germany. Now, there will be questions about whether that's been done to hide their real location as well. And you can do that, of course, online by changing your IP address and using multiple VPNs. The X handle that we're referring to, the Shih Tzu Wombo 777, actually tweeted 7 hoax threats so far of the 22 that have been received. And this X handle used multiple VPNs for airline hoax threats, which is why it's become largely difficult for authorities to clamp down or identify exactly where it's come from and the source. Now, there are 2 agencies that have been roped in, which is I4CI and CERT-IN, which are essentially, cyber awareness groups that have been roped in for their expertise in really unmasking the X user here. Can they actually do it is the big question right now, because so far they've been struggling to narrow down and zero down on exactly who's done it. And to explain why this is so hard, I'm joined by Kanishk Gaur, technology expert here on 6 p.m. Prime. Kanishk, thanks very much for joining us. Good evening. What's been happening in the last 1 week is extremely worrying for Indian aviation, for all of us. If we're planning to board a flight, there's always a concern. What if such a bomb threat is issued? But the question I'm asking right now, Kanishk, is that, look, most of these threats have been issued on social media. And you'd think it's very easy to kind of track down someone on social media once they post it on a handle. Why has it been so difficult for authorities to actually zero in on who's running these X handles?
Thank you for inviting me. The reason why it is difficult is because there is a VPN which is masking the location of the actual perpetrator. The use of the VPN is to guard the IP address. So when the VPN comes in, it hops on to different locations. In this scenario, it is hopping on to London and the other location which you mentioned. So the issue is getting this information from the VPN service provider. There could be another layer to it if someone's using a Tor browser, which has a onion relay link. There could be multiple other locations and multiple other IP addresses. Now, the 2 agencies that you have mentioned are not basically investigative agencies. They are law enforcement agencies, the MHA I4C division, which has been made as a nodal organization for tracking cyber criminal activity in India as per the section of the IT Act. The second agency is Computer Emergency Response Team in India, which is also a regulatory body, and it came up with a certain guidelines in June 2022, where all the VPN service providers were required to store information of users up to 5 years. So
but it's also worrying, isn't it, Kanishk? It's a bit worrying that, there's this kind of threats coming in, which affect Twitter, so many of us. And yet, Kanishk, if you can hear me, this is extremely worrying. It is concerning that authorities are struggling so much to clamp down on what seem to be stray incidents, at least, on incidents of minors who seem to be issuing these threats. So you'd think that these aren't experts, they aren't hardened cyber criminals. And yet it's so hard to track them down. Surely there must be a mechanism that makes it easier, because you tend to wonder, if there can't be a crackdown on cyber crime like this, then how really can you control minor ones? All right, I don't think I have Kanishk with me there. We'll reconnect with him to answer that question. But like I said, a lot of questions that come up on why, if these are just minor pranksters who seem to be following a trend of issuing threats, why has there been no crackdown whatsoever? Why have none of them been identified at this point? We're going to continue tracking this very, very closely.